The grand silver ship hovered silently above Earth's capital, its smooth surface reflecting the city lights below. It was a masterpiece of Zenari engineering, sleek, perfect, and without a single flaw. The Zenari were an advanced alien species, known for their intelligence, logic, and precision. They considered themselves superior to all others, especially humans. Inside the ship, Sarah stood near a large viewing window, observing the planet below. She was different from most Zenari. Unlike her kind, who saw humans as weak and chaotic, she found them interesting. There was something about the way humans lived, the way they smiled even in hardship, that fascinated her. Sarah was one of the highest-ranking diplomats of her people, sent to Earth for an important alliance meeting. It was supposed to be a simple visit, meet with human leaders, discuss trade agreements, and then leave. But something about this planet made her pause. A soft chime echoed through the chamber. "Ambassador Sarah, the meeting is about to begin," a Zenari officer informed her. She turned away from the window and nodded. "I will be there shortly." As the ship descended, landing smoothly on the Earth's surface, Sarah took a deep breath. The doors opened, and she stepped out onto the grand welcome platform. Human officials stood in a line, waiting to greet her. The air was different from her homeworld, warmer, filled with countless scents, and carrying the distant hum of life. A man in a formal suit stepped forward. "Ambassador Sarah, welcome to Earth. We are honored to host you." Sarah nodded politely. "Thank you. I look forward to our discussions." As they walked toward the conference hall, she noticed something, or rather, someone, out of place. A human technician was crouched near a large metal console, tools in hand. He wasn't wearing a suit like the others. His clothes were simple, a little dusty from work. His brown hair was slightly messy, and he didn't seem to care about the grand event happening around him. Something about him stood out to Sarah. While the officials around her spoke in careful, rehearsed words, this man was completely focused on his task. His hands moved quickly as he adjusted wires inside the console. Suddenly, the translator device in Sarah's ear beeped strangely, then let out a small static noise. She frowned and touched it. Strange. The technician looked up, noticing her discomfort. "Problem with the translator?" he asked casually. Sarah blinked. Most humans spoke to her with extreme politeness, but this man sounded completely relaxed. "Yes," she replied, surprised that his words were clear despite the device malfunctioning. He stood up, wiped his hands on his pants, and reached into his tool bag. "Let me check it." The officials nearby looked shocked. One of them stepped forward. "This is Ambassador Sarah. You should." But Sarah raised a hand, stopping the man from speaking. She was curious. "Go ahead," she said. The technician smiled slightly and opened a small toolkit. "Hold still for a second." He worked quickly, adjusting a small setting on the translator. Within moments, the static disappeared. "There, should be fine now." Sarah touched the device and listened carefully. The noise was gone. "That was fast," she admitted. The man shrugged. "Not a big deal. These models get a bit of interference sometimes." One of the officials, still looking uncomfortable, introduced him. "This is Leo. He's just a technician." Leo gave a small nod. "Nice to meet you, I guess." Sarah studied him for a moment. He was different from the others. He didn't try to impress her with fancy words or compliments. He simply helped because he wanted to. It was unusual. She nodded back. "Thank you, Leo." The moment passed quickly as the meeting began. Sarah followed the officials into the grand conference hall, but something about the encounter stayed in her mind. Humans were supposed to be simple creatures, emotional, unpredictable, and weak. But as she sat among her own kind, listening to the cold, calculated voices of the Zenari, she wondered, was there something more to humans than what her people believed? Sarah sat in the grand conference hall, surrounded by Zenari diplomats and Earth's top leaders. The room was filled with voices discussing trade agreements, scientific exchanges, and political matters. Everything was formal, calculated, and efficient, just as the Zineri liked it. Yet, Sarah's mind was elsewhere. She found herself thinking about the human technician, Leo. Unlike the officials in this room, he had not tried to impress her. He had simply done his job, without fear, hesitation, or unnecessary words. That was rare. Most species treated the Zineri with caution, always careful not to offend them. But Leo had acted as if she was just another person. Why did that seem so refreshing? She focused back on the discussion. A Zineri diplomat was speaking in his usual cold tone. It is logical that humanity aligns with us. We offer superior technology, medical advancements, and guidance. In return, we expect cooperation and proper regulation of human actions in the wider galaxy. One of the human representatives frowned. Proper regulation. That sounds like control. The Zineri diplomat barely reacted. It is simply efficiency. Humanity's unpredictable nature could lead to mistakes. We can help prevent that. Sarah watched the human representatives exchange glances. She could sense their discomfort. They wanted the Zineri's technology, but they did not like the idea of being guided. After hours of discussions, the meeting finally ended. As the Zineri leaders left to return to their ship, Sarah chose to stay behind for a while. She claimed she wanted to observe human culture, but in truth, she was curious about something else. She walked through the corridors of the conference center, passing by high-ranking officials. Then, in a quieter section of the building, she spotted Leo. He was sitting on the floor, fixing another console. A small device in his ear played music, a human song with a steady rhythm and soft lyrics. He was humming along, completely unaware of her presence. Sarah tilted her head. Among her people, everything had a purpose. Music was only used for ceremonies or focus training, but Leo was listening simply because he enjoyed it. She stepped closer. That sound. What is it? Leo looked up in surprise. He quickly removed his earpiece. Oh, it's just music. Music? Sarah repeated. For what purpose? Leo gave a small chuckle. No purpose. It just makes things better. Sarah frowned. Better in what way? He leaned back against the wall, thinking for a moment. It helps you feel things. Happy, sad, excited, whatever you need. Sarah considered this. The Zineri did not believe in unnecessary emotions. They viewed feelings as distractions, obstacles to logical thinking. Yet, humans embraced them, even created things to make emotions stronger. Your people rely too much on feelings, she said. It makes you weak. Leo smirked. Or maybe it makes us strong. Sarah arched an eyebrow. Explain. Leo set down his tools and stretched his arms. Look, I get it. Your people are advanced. Logical. But humans, we survive because we feel things. We fight for things we care about. We don't just live to exist. We live because we dream, because we hope. Sarah stared at him. Dreams and hope are not practical. He shrugged. Maybe not, but they push us forward. They make us want to be better. Without emotions, we wouldn't build, explore, or take risks. We wouldn't love, laugh, or create. Sarah had no response. No one in her species had ever spoken about emotions this way. To the Zineri, emotions were problems to be controlled. But Leo spoke as if they were humanity's greatest strength. Before she could say anything else, Leo checked his wrist device. Well, my break's over. Gotta get back to work. He stood up, grabbed his tool bag, and gave a casual wave. See you around, Ambassador. Sarah watched him leave. For the first time, she questioned everything she had been taught. Maybe the humans were not as weak as the Zineri believed. Maybe, just maybe, they had something her people were missing. Sarah stood on the balcony of the guest quarters assigned to her. The city stretched out before her, tall buildings, glowing streetlights, and the endless movement of humans. Unlike the Zineri cities, which were quiet and orderly, This place was alive. Even late at night, people walked, laughed, and talked, their voices mixing into the distant hum of the city. She had spent her whole life among the Zinari, where everything was structured and precise. There was no room for mistakes, no space for unnecessary emotions. Perfection was the goal. And yet, as she observed this world, she began to wonder, was perfection truly the best way? Her thoughts kept returning to Leo. His words about dreams, emotions, and hope had unsettled her. To the Zinari, such things were distractions. Yet humans saw them as strength. Was it possible that her people had been wrong? A chime interrupted her thoughts. The communication device on her wrist glowed, and a familiar voice spoke. "Ambassador Sarah, the Council requests an immediate report." Sarah exhaled slowly before answering. Understood. Connecting now. A holographic screen appeared in front of her, showing 3 high-ranking Zinari officials. Their faces were calm, their expressions neutral, just as always. One of them, Councillor Vecker, spoke first. "Ambassador, your presence on Earth has lasted longer than necessary. Have you secured the agreement?" Sarah kept her voice steady. "The humans are hesitant. They do not wish to be controlled." Another councillor, Eris, frowned slightly. "Control is necessary for efficiency. Left alone, they will make mistakes." Sarah hesitated. She had always believed in the Zinari way, but now she was starting to see things differently. Mistakes allow them to grow. They learn from them. There was a brief silence. Then Vecker spoke again. "You are spending too much time among them." Sarah straightened. "I am doing what is required for this mission." Eris studied her carefully. "We have noticed your interactions with a human technician. He is irrelevant to our purpose. Your time should be spent with their leaders." Sarah felt a slight unease. "I am observing human nature. To understand them fully, I must see all aspects of their society." Vecker's expression remained unreadable. "Do not let their ways influence you, Sarah. We are superior for a reason. We do not allow emotions to weaken us. Do not forget who you are." The screen went dark. The connection ended. Sarah clenched her fists. "Do not forget who you are." But that was the problem. For the first time in her life, she wasn't sure who she was anymore. She turned back to the cityscape. From her balcony, she saw a small food stand at the street corner. People gathered there, laughing, talking, enjoying simple meals. Among them, she recognized a familiar figure, Leo. Curiosity pulled her forward. A few minutes later, Sarah walked down the street, blending into the human crowd. It was unusual for a Zinari diplomat to walk so freely, but she didn't care. She approached the food stand, where Leo was eating something wrapped in paper. He noticed her and raised an eyebrow. "Didn't expect to see you here, Ambassador." Sarah tilted her head. "I wanted to observe more of human life." Leo smirked. "And you picked a street food stand. Interesting choice." Sarah glanced at his meal. "What are you eating?" Leo held up the wrapped item. "It's called a sandwich. Want to try?" Sarah hesitated. Zinari food was carefully measured for nutritional value. They did not eat for enjoyment. But humans, they did things differently. After a moment, she nodded. Leo handed her a fresh sandwich from the stand. She examined it, then took a small bite. The flavors were unfamiliar, but not unpleasant. Leo grinned. "Well," Sarah swallowed and considered. "It is different." Leo laughed. "That's one way to put it." Sarah looked around. People were relaxed, smiling, enjoying simple things. There was no strict order, no pressure to be perfect, just life in its purest form. And for the first time, Sarah wondered, had her people been missing something all along? Sarah sat alone in the dimly lit observation deck of the Zinari embassy, staring out at the human city below. The streets were alive with lights, movement, and sound, so chaotic, so unpredictable. Yet, in that chaos, there was something strangely beautiful. For weeks, she had studied humanity. She had spoken with their leaders, observed their way of life, and even spent time with ordinary people. And in all that time, one question kept returning to her mind. Why do humans refuse to be controlled? The Zinari believed in structure, order, control. It was the reason their civilization had lasted for so long, why they had advanced far beyond other species. And yet, humans thrived in disorder. They made mistakes. They fought. They struggled. Yet they continued forward. She thought of Leo, the human technician she had met. He had no high status, no great power, yet he spoke with confidence, as if his words mattered just as much as any leader's. He questioned things. He challenged ideas. And he made her think in ways she never had before. A quiet chime interrupted her thoughts. A message. She stood and approached the console, her fingers moving across the smooth surface. The screen flickered, revealing a transmission from the Zinari High Council. Councillor Vekar's face appeared, his expression unreadable. Ambassador Sarah, it is time for your final report on humanity. Sarah took a slow breath. She had expected this. The Zinari were preparing to finalize their alliance with Earth. Her report would determine the final steps. Humanity is unlike any species we have encountered, she began carefully. Vekar nodded. And their weaknesses. Sarah hesitated. Weaknesses. That was what the Zinari always focused on. Where a species was vulnerable, where they could be guided, controlled. She thought about their emotions, their conflicts, their unpredictable nature. But she also thought about their strength, their resilience, their ability to adapt. Finally, she spoke. They are unpredictable, but they are also strong in ways we do not fully understand. Vekar's expression hardened. Then they must be guided. Sarah's fingers curled into fists. Guided. That was the Zinari way. Not through war, not through force, but through control disguised as aid. She knew what was coming next. You will ensure that Earth's leaders sign the agreement, Vekar said. Once they do, we will begin integration. Slowly, carefully. Humanity will become part of the Zinari system. Sarah's breath caught. And if they refuse? Vekar's eyes darkened. Then we will create circumstances where they have no choice. The transmission ended. Sarah stood frozen. This was not an alliance. This was a quiet takeover. She turned back to the city below, her thoughts racing. Humanity trusted the Zinari, believed they were offering friendship. They had no idea that the alliance would strip them of their independence, that in time they would no longer control their own future. And she was expected to help make it happen. A sudden knock at the door made her turn sharply. Leo stood there, arms crossed, his usual smirk absent. You look like you just found out something bad, he said. Sarah hesitated. She was a Zinari ambassador. She was not supposed to reveal classified information to a human. But something inside her shifted. Maybe it was the way Leo looked at her, not as a superior, not as an enemy, but as an equal. Maybe it was because, for the first time in her life, she felt doubt. She took a deep breath. Leo, we need to talk. She was about to make a choice that would change everything. Sarah stood alone in the dimly lit corridor of the embassy, her mind troubled. The words of the Zinari Council echoed in her head. Cease your association with the human or risk your position. She had always followed orders without question. The Zinari valued logic, control, and efficiency above all else. But now, for the first time, she hesitated. Leo's words kept returning to her. Maybe our mistakes make us stronger. She had spent more time with humans than any Zinari ever had. She had seen their flaws, their unpredictability, their emotions, their stubbornness. But she had also seen something else. They cared. They fought for what they believed in. They were not weak. They were something entirely different. And now, she knew the truth about the Zinari's plan. She had discovered it by accident. An encrypted message meant for the Zinari leadership. The so-called alliance was not about peaceful cooperation. The Zenari intended to influence Earth's leaders, slowly pushing humanity into dependence. Their advanced technology would come with hidden controls, limiting human progress. In time, humanity would no longer be free. Sarah clenched her fists. This was not an alliance. It was control disguised as kindness. She had two choices. She could remain loyal to her people, stay silent, and watch as humanity lost its independence. Or she could betray her own kind. A sound behind her made her turn. Leo stood there, arms crossed. "You've been avoiding me," he said. Sarah exhaled. It was necessary. Leo studied her. "You look like you've seen something you weren't supposed to." She hesitated. Telling him the truth would change everything. But she had no one else to trust. Finally, she spoke. "The Zenari do not intend to help humanity. They plan to control it." Leo frowned. "Control it? How?" Sarah explained what she had found. The hidden codes, the manipulation, the slow but certain takeover. As she spoke, Leo's expression darkened. "They want to make us dependent on them," he muttered. "So we'll never be a threat." Sarah nodded. "It is their way. They believe control is the only path to order." Leo was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed. "And what about you?" Sarah looked at him sharply. "What do you mean?" "You're one of them," Leo said. "Do you believe in their way?" Sarah wanted to say yes. It would have been easier. But deep inside, she knew the answer had changed. "No," she admitted. "I do not." Leo exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "So what now?" Sarah looked away. "I do not know. If you expose them, they'll turn against you," Leo warned. "They won't let you go that easily." Sarah knew he was right. The Zenari did not tolerate betrayal. If she chose to help humanity, she would lose everything: her position, her status, even her people. But if she did nothing, she would lose something more important: her own conscience. Sarah looked back at Leo. "I need your help." Leo raised an eyebrow. "You're asking the human technician for help." Sarah gave a small, tired smile. "You are the only one I trust." Leo sighed, then nodded. "All right, let's stop them." For the first time in her life, Sarah was going against her own people. It was dangerous. It was reckless. But as she walked beside Leo, she felt something she had never felt before. Freedom. Sarah had always believed the Zenari way was the right way. Logic, control, and order. These were the foundations of her people's success. But now, as she walked through the quiet corridors of the human embassy, she felt something new: doubt. Leo walked beside her, his hands in his pockets, his expression serious. He had agreed to help her without hesitation, even though he knew how dangerous it was. Humans had no advanced technology like the Zenari. They had no genetic enhancements, no perfect calculations. Yet Leo was ready to stand against one of the most powerful species in the galaxy. Sarah couldn't understand it. "Why?" she asked suddenly. Leo glanced at her. "Why what?" "Why do you fight when the odds are against you?" she said. "You know the Zenari are more advanced. You know they have control over powerful technology. Yet you do not give up." Leo stopped walking and turned to face her. "Because giving up means losing everything." Sarah frowned. "But logic says..." "Forget logic for a second," Leo interrupted. "If we always followed logic, we'd never take risks. We'd never dream. We'd never hope. And without hope, we wouldn't be human." Sarah stared at him. "Hope is not practical." Leo chuckled. "No, it's not. But it's powerful." They continued walking, their footsteps echoing softly in the hallway. Sarah thought about everything she had seen on Earth. Humans were chaotic, emotional, and unpredictable. But they also had something the Zenari didn't. They had the ability to change. They made mistakes, but they learned from them. They failed, but they kept going. And now she was beginning to see that this was not a weakness. It was a strength. Finally, they reached the control room, where the embassy's main communication systems were located. This was their plan. Sarah would use her diplomatic access to send a warning to Earth's leaders about the Cenari's hidden agenda. If the humans knew the truth, they would never agree to the alliance. But as Sarah reached for the control panel, an alert flashed across the screen. Access restricted. She froze. The Cenari had already locked her out. They know, she whispered. Leo leaned over her shoulder. What does that mean? Sarah clenched her fists. It means they are watching me. They suspect I may act against them. Leo cursed under his breath. Then we need another plan. Sarah took a deep breath. There is one way. Leo raised an eyebrow. I don't like the way you said that. Sarah turned to face him. I need to return to the Cenari ship. Leo blinked. You're joking. I am not, Sarah said. Their main communication hub is on the ship. If I can access it directly, I can send the message before they stop me. Leo ran a hand through his hair. That's insane. They're already suspicious of you. Sarah knew he was right. The moment she stepped back onto the ship, she would be under surveillance. But she had no other choice. I have to do this, she said firmly. If humanity signs the alliance, they will lose their freedom. Leo sighed. All right, but you're not going alone. Sarah frowned. That would be impossible. Leo smirked. You forget, I'm a technician. I know how to get places I'm not supposed to be. Sarah hesitated. If Leo was caught, the Cenari would not show mercy. Yet, as she looked at him, she saw no fear, only determination. For the first time in her life, she realized something. Humans did not fight because they were the strongest. They fought because they refused to lose. Sarah nodded. Then let's do this. Together, they turned toward the Cenari ship. The fight for humanity's future had begun. Sarah stood at the entrance of the Cenari ship, her heart steady, but her mind racing. The massive silver structure loomed before her, its smooth surface reflecting the lights of the human city behind her. This was home, yet, for the first time, it felt foreign. Leo was hidden nearby, waiting for her signal. He had insisted on coming, but sneaking a human onto a Cenari vessel was nearly impossible. Instead, they had planned a different approach. Sarah would enter first and disable the ship's internal security, allowing Leo to slip inside unnoticed. Taking a deep breath, Sarah stepped forward. The doors slid open silently, and she walked into the familiar halls of her people's ship. A Cenari officer greeted her with a formal nod. Ambassador Sarah, you have returned. She kept her expression neutral. I have matters to discuss with the council. The officer studied her for a moment before stepping aside. Proceed. Sarah walked forward, her movements calm and controlled, just as she had trained all her life. Inside, however, she was calculating every step. She had to reach the security control panel without raising suspicion. She made her way to a side corridor, away from the main sections of the ship. Here, the walls were lined with control panels that regulated security, navigation, and ship operations. She stopped in front of one and placed her hand on the scanner. Access granted. Her fingers moved swiftly, disabling the internal motion sensors in one specific area, Sector 3C. That was where Leo would enter. She had only a few minutes before someone noticed. She activated her communicator. Leo, the path is clear. Move now. A few seconds later, Leo's voice came through. On my way. Sarah turned and continued toward the main control room. She had to act as if nothing was wrong. The Cenari Council could not suspect her. When she entered, 3 council members were already there. Their expressions were calm, unreadable. Ambassador Sarah, Councillor Vecker said, your actions have been unusual. Explain yourself. Sarah met his gaze. I have been studying the humans more closely. I wanted to understand them fully before finalizing the alliance. Councillor Eris tilted his head slightly. And what have you learned? Sarah chose her words carefully. They are unpredictable, but they have strong potential. They do not seek chaos. They seek growth. Vecker's eyes narrowed. Growth without order leads to destruction. This is why they require guidance. Sarah hesitated. And if they do not wish to be guided? Eris sighed. Then they will make mistakes, and mistakes lead to ruin. We will prevent that. Sarah clenched her fists. By taking away their freedom. There was silence. The council members exchanged glances. Vecker's voice was firm. Freedom is an illusion. What matters is survival. Sarah's heart pounded. She had spent her life believing that. But now she wasn't so sure. Before she could respond, an alarm blared through the ship. Security breach detected in Sector 3C. Sarah's stomach dropped. Leo. Eris turned to her sharply. Did you know about this? Sarah forced her expression to remain calm. No. Vecker's gaze hardened. Then you will not mind if we investigate. Sarah knew she had seconds to act. If they caught Leo, everything would be lost. She took a slow breath, then did the one thing no Zineri would expect. She ran. The council members shouted behind her, but she was already sprinting down the corridor. She had no plan, only one goal: reach Leo before they did. For the first time in her life, she was not following orders. She was making her own choice. Sarah ran through the silent halls of the Zineri ship, her heart pounding. She had spent years training in discipline, in control, never in reckless movement. And yet here she was, running as fast as she could. She had to reach Leo before the others did. The ship's alarm continued to blare, red warning lights flashing along the corridors. She turned sharply into Sector 3C, where she had disabled security just minutes ago. But now, Zineri officers were already responding. 2 of them stood near the entrance, their expressions sharp with suspicion. Sarah forced herself to remain calm. She walked toward them, masking her urgency. The council sent me to investigate the security breach. The officers exchanged glances, but her rank as an ambassador gave her authority. One of them stepped aside. We detected movement inside. No life signs, but someone is here. Sarah nodded. I will handle it. She stepped past them into the dimly lit corridor of Sector 3C. The moment the doors closed behind her, she moved quickly, scanning for Leo. A whisper came from the shadows. Sarah. She turned sharply. Leo was crouched near a maintenance panel, staying out of sight. His usual relaxed expression was gone, replaced by tension. That was fast, he muttered. What's the plan? Sarah exhaled. We need to leave. Leo smirked. Great plan. Just one problem. How? Sarah's mind raced. The ship's main exits were heavily guarded, and after the alarm, no unauthorized personnel would be allowed to leave. There is an emergency pod bay 2 levels down, she said. If we can reach it, we can escape. Leo nodded. Then let's move. They slipped through the hallways, keeping to the shadows. Sarah led the way, using her knowledge of the ship to avoid patrols. But the further they went, the more guards appeared. The Zineri were hunting them. As they reached the lower levels, a voice rang through the ship's speakers. Ambassador Sarah, you have betrayed your people. Sarah froze. It was Counselor Vekkar. Return now, and we will show mercy. Leo glanced at her. That doesn't sound like real mercy. Sarah knew he was right. If she surrendered, she would never leave the ship again. The Zineri did not tolerate betrayal. She took a deep breath. We keep going. They moved quickly, but the guards were closing in. By the time they reached the emergency pod bay, a group of Zineri officers stood between them and the escape pods. Leo groaned. Of course. Sarah looked around, her mind working fast. She spotted a control panel nearby. If she could override the system, she could activate the launch sequence. I need time, she whispered to Leo. Leo sighed. Fine. I'll keep them busy. Before she could stop him, he stepped forward. Hey guys, Leo called to the Zineri guards. I think there's been a misunderstanding. The officers raised their weapons. You are trespassing on a Ceneri vessel. Leo put his hands up. Yeah, about that. Before he finished speaking, he grabbed a small device from his pocket and threw it to the ground. Smoke erupted around them, filling the bay with a thick white mist. Sarah didn't waste a second. She dashed to the control panel, her fingers moving rapidly over the screen. The emergency sequence began, and the pod doors unlocked with a hiss. "Leo," she shouted. Through the smoke, she saw his silhouette moving toward her. The guards were shouting, but they couldn't see clearly. Leo reached her just as she slammed the pod's activation button. The door slid open, and they both jumped inside. Sarah pressed the launch command. The last thing she saw before the pod ejected was the furious expression of Counselor Vekar on the screen. Then, with a powerful jolt, they were blasted into space. The escape pod shot through space, spinning slightly as it left the Ceneri ship behind. Sarah and Leo sat strapped into their seats, the force of the launch pressing them back. Alarms beeped inside the pod, signaling rapid descent toward Earth's atmosphere. Leo glanced at Sarah. "Tell me we're not about to crash." Sarah tapped a few controls, steadying their course. "The pod is programmed to land safely." Leo sighed in relief. "That's good, because I really don't want my last words to be oops." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Even in danger, Leo remained unpredictable. Humans truly were different. The pod heated up as it entered the atmosphere, flames licking the outer shell. Outside the window, the blue and green surface of Earth grew larger. Despite the chaos of the moment, Sarah felt something unexpected. She felt free. For the first time, she had made her own choice, not because of orders, not because of duty, but because she believed it was right. The pod shook violently as it neared the ground. Then, with a loud crash, it landed in an open field, sending dirt and grass flying in all directions. Leo groaned. Well, that was fun. Sarah unbuckled her harness and stood. "We must move. The Ceneri will come for us." Leo followed her out of the pod. They stepped into the cool night air, surrounded by trees and distant city lights. The stars above were clear, but Sarah knew that somewhere among them, the Ceneri ship was watching. Leo stretched his arms. "So, what now?" Sarah took a deep breath. "We warn humanity." Leo nodded. "And you? What happens to you?" She hesitated. She had betrayed the Ceneri. She could never return. And yet, for the first time, that didn't frighten her. "I stay," she said simply, "with humans." Leo grinned. "Didn't think I'd be getting a Ceneri roommate, but all right." Sarah gave him a curious look. "Roommate?" Leo laughed. "Relax. I'll find you a place to stay. But first, we have to make sure Earth doesn't fall into Ceneri control." Sarah nodded. They had escaped, but the fight was not over. The Ceneri would not give up easily. But now she had seen what made humanity special. Their spirit, their determination, their willingness to fight even when the odds were against them. And she had chosen to stand with them. As they walked toward the distant city, Sarah felt something she had never known before. Hope.